Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am your host, Liv, back here with more reading of the Odyssey. Okay, I am so excited that you all are so excited about this fresh and newer translation of the Odyssey that I can now read to you all. I really needed you all to be excited because I really wanted to do this. But you are, and I'm really thrilled to hear from everyone how much you've enjoyed the context breaks around where I would pause for ads normally, which is great to hear as well. I've already got a few questions for you all, so we're going to dive right back into this. And if you have more Odyssey specific questions or topics you'd like me to talk about in those kind of context breaks, make sure you submit them. You can either just comment on this episode on Spotify or send a message through our website, mythsbaby.com/questions. If it's specifically for the Odyssey, just put that in the question if you can, just so that we know where to go. And as always, though, submit questions for an ongoing Q&A episode. I'd love to do another one, but we only have a few. And quite frankly, there's this question that's really well-meaning and really well thought out. But basically it boils down to another question of why it's women's problem to save men from the thing that they have created. And I really want to answer that question. So send in a few more so I don't just sound like I'm going to sound like I am, but add some more so that I have some variety for the next conversation, or the next Q&A episode, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay. Also, full disclosure, this episode, I'm recording it at 8:30 in the morning because I have had a busy week. I went from not really recording so much of my own voice in the podcast for a while due to me writing my Odyssey, to this week I recorded that first new episode in ages, which I know I was a bit ragey. I'm gonna need you all to comment a bit more because I know it was ragey, but I also know I'm right. So tell me. But anyway, I recorded that one, and then on Tuesday, yes, I spent 8 straight hours recording the audiobook for my Odyssey, and then came home and was like, oh, I have to record another reading. I need a minute. And so I did just wait, and now I'm doing it in the morning because, there is never too much Odyssey, but unfortunately there is too much me reading aloud for my voice, especially in this Toronto winter that we are having, because Jesus fucking Christ, is it ever going to end? Is this the coldest, driest winter of all time? In any case, we're back with the Odyssey, where they never had such cold, dry winters. And good for them. Good for them. So where we last left off, we had finished book 2, and, we'd figured out where Odysseus had generally been for quite some time, stuck on Calypso's island, and what had been going on home at Ithaca. Nothing great. We heard from Telemachus. He's a bit whiny, but it's okay. He's a young boy. What are we gonna do? And Telemachus was sent by Athena on his little quest, his telemachy, his little journey to find news about his father. And so first up, Telemachus is headed to Pylos, and that is where we will find him now. This is the Odyssey by Homer, Book 3. With immense, immense thanks for this translation by Ian Johnston. When the sun had left the splendid sea and risen up into an all-bronze heaven, giving light to gods and mortal creatures and grain to farmers' fields, the ship and crew reached Pylos, a well-built city ruled by Nestor. There by the sea, the city folk were preparing black bulls as holy offerings to Lord Poseidon, dark-haired shaker of the earth. There were 9 groups of them, each one 500 strong, and 9 offerings of bulls ready for sacrifice. As they were sampling some of the inner organs and cooking thigh parts for the gods, the ship and crew were heading straight for shore. The crew hauled in and furled the sails on their trim ship, moored it, and disembarked. With Athena showing the way, Telemachus stepped from the ship. The bright-eyed goddess spoke to him. Telemachus, no need to feel ashamed, not in the least, for this is why you've sailed across the sea, to get information about your father, where he is buried, and what fate has befallen him. Come now, go directly to horse-taming Nestor. Let's find out what advice his heart contains. You yourself must beg him to tell the truth. He will not lie, for he is truly wise. Prude Telemachus then answered her and said, Mentor, how shall I go there and greet him? I've had no practice with such formal speech. And then, when a young man seeks to question an older one, his words could bring him shame. Athena, goddess with the gleaming eyes, then said, Telemachus, your heart will think of something, and power from heaven will provide the rest, for I don't think that you were born and raised without being favored by the gods. She spoke. Pallas Athena quickly led them along the shore. Telemachus followed in the goddess's footsteps. They reached the group of Pylians assembled there, where Nestor sat among his sons. All around them, his companions were getting ready for the feast, cooking meat and setting other pieces into spits. When they observed the strangers, they came thronging round, clasping them by their hands, inviting them to sit. Pisistratus, son of Nestor, approached them first, took Athena and Telemachus both by the hand, and invited them to sit on cushions on the beach, and to eat beside his brother Thrasymedes and his father. He gave them portions of the innards, and then into a cup of gold he poured some wine. Making a toast to Pallas Athena, daughter of Aegis bearing Zeus, he spoke to her and said, Stranger, you must pray to Lord Poseidon. This celebration you have chanced upon is in his honor. When you have offered your libation and have prayed, as is right, hand your comrade the cup of honey wine, so he can pour out his libation too. For he looks like someone who offers prayers to the immortals. All men need the gods. Since he's a younger man of my own age, I'll start by giving you this golden cup. Saying this, he set the cup of sweet wine in her hand. Athena rejoiced at such a wise and righteous man, because he had offered the gold cup to her first. At once she made a solemn prayer to Lord Poseidon. Hear me, Poseidon, you who enfold the earth. Do not hold back from bringing to fulfillment those events we pray for. And to begin with, give Nestor and his sons a glorious name, and then grant all other men of Pylos a pleasing recompense in answer to these lovely offerings. And in addition, grant that Telemachus and I get back once we have accomplished all those things for which we came here in our black, swift ship. That is the prayer Athena uttered, while she herself was taking care that everything would work out well. She gave Telemachus the fine, two-handled cup. Odysseus's brave son then made a prayer like hers. Once they finished roasting the upper cuts of meat and had pulled them off the spits, they served out portions and had a sumptuous feast. When every one of them had taken food and drink to his own heart's content, Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, began to speak. It seems to me that it's a good time now to ask our guests to tell us who they are, now they've enjoyed our food. And so, strangers, who are you? What country did you sail from when you set your course across the water? Are you on business, or are you roaming on the seas at random, like those pirates who sail here and there, risking their own lives, posing a threat to men from other lands? Then prude Telemachus spoke up in reply, and boldly too, for Athena herself had put fresh courage in his heart, so he might talk about his absent father and acquire for himself a noble reputation. Nestor, son of Neleus, great glory of Achaeans, you asked us the land we come from, so I will tell you. We are from Ithaca, from below Mount Nion. My business, which I'll mention, is private, not a public matter. I am pursuing widespread rumors of the brave Odysseus, my father, who, they say, fought at your side and utterly destroyed the Trojan city. We have heard reports about the others, those who went to war against the Trojans, where each met his piteous fate. But Zeus, son of Cronos, has made Odysseus' death something unknown, for none of us can say with any confidence where he was killed, whether he was overwhelmed by enemies on land or killed at sea by waves stirred up by Amphitrite. That's why I have come to sit now in your home, for there's a chance you could provide some news of how he died, something you may have seen with your own eyes. Or perhaps you've heard about his wanderings from someone else, for his mother bore him to go through trouble more than other men. Do not pity me, form compassion, just offer me kind words of consolation, but tell me truly how you chanced to see him. If in word or deed, my father, Odysseus, ever made a promise and kept his word, when you two were among the Trojans where the Achaeans suffered such distress, I ask you now, remember what he did and give me the truth. Responding to Telemachus, Geraenian horseman Nestor said, My friend, you make me call to mind the suffering and boundless courage of Achaea's sons in all they went through over there, the things we had to endure while on board the ships as we roamed across the misty waters in search of loot, with Achilles in the lead, all the fights around great Priam's city where so many of our finest men were killed, where warlike Ajax and Achilles lie, and Patroclus too, a man whose counsel was like the gods. My own dear son fell there, Antilochus, as strong as he was noble, outstanding for his speed and fighting skills. And we endured countless other hardships apart from these. Who could possibly describe every detail of the men who perished? If you were to spend 5 or 6 years here questioning me about the brave Achaeans and the troubles they went through, you'd grow tired and sail back home well before I'd finished. 9 years we spent scheming to bring them down with every sort of trick, but Cronos' son made all our plans so hard to carry out. Over there, no one ever tried to claim he could match Odysseus' shrewd advice. In devising every kind of devious scheme, he was easily the best, your father, if indeed you are his son. Looking at you, I am astonished, for you truly speak the way he did. No one could ever think a younger man could talk so much like him. All that time back then, never once did I and Lord Odysseus, in council or assembly, disagree. We spoke with a single heart and gave the Argives wise and useful views about how those events would best turn out. But when Priam's lofty city was destroyed and our ships set off, the Achaean fleet was scattered by some god. And even so, Zeus planned in his heart to give Achaeans a sorrowful return. They had not been wise or righteous, so many met a nasty fate, thanks to the mortal anger of Athena, bright-eyed goddess with a mighty father. She incited both sons of Atreus to quarrel with each other. The two men had quickly called Achaeans to assembly, not in the usual way, but at sunset. Achaea's sons arrived all flushed with wine. Both kings delivered speeches. They exclaimed why they had called the meeting. Menelaus told Achaeans to plan on going home on the broad back of the sea. What he said did not please Agamemnon in the least, because he wished to keep the army there so they could all offer sacrifices to appease Athena's dreadful anger. The fool! He didn't know there was no chance that she was going to hear what he would say, for the minds of gods who live forever are not altered quickly. So these two men stood there, trading hard words with each other. The armed Achaeans jumped up on their feet, making a huge din. 2 different plans were among them, and that night No one slept, as both sides kept arguing, each one with harsher opinions of the other, for Zeus was bringing us a wretched fate. In the morning, some of us dragged our ships down to the sparkling sea, put goods on board, our women, too, who wore their girdles low. But half the soldiers stayed, remaining there with Agamemnon, son of Atreus, shepherd of his army. So half of us embarked and rowed away. Our ships moved fast, some god had made the yawning sea grow calm. We came to Tenedos and sacrificed to all the gods, still keen to get back home. But even then Zeus had not decided to let us all return. A stubborn god. He stirred up a second vicious quarrel. Some men turned their curving ships around and sailed back. Among them Lord Odysseus, that wise and cunning man, with his soldiers. Once again he favored Agamemnon, son of Atreus. Then I fled away with the remaining ships which followed me. I knew a god was planning something bad, and Diomedes, son of Tydeus, urged his comrades on to act as we did. But fair-haired Menelaus and his ship sailed later and caught up with us at Lesbos. We'd been arguing about the major stretch. Should we sail to the north of rugged Chios, towards the island Psyria, keeping Chios to our left, or take the southern route, below Chios and past stormy Mimas? So we asked a god to give us a sign. He did, and ordered us to carve our way across the great sea straight to Evia, for that way we could escape from trouble as quickly as we could. A blustery wind began to blow, and so our ships moved fast across the fish-filled seas. That very night we landed at Geristus, where we offered many bulls' thighs to Poseidon, our thanks for crossing the great sea. On the fourth day, crews of Diomedes, son of Tydeus, tamer of horses, berthed their well-built ships in Argos, but I sailed on to Pylos. Once a god sent that wind to blow us home, it never once let up. And so, my lad, I made it back. But of the Achaeans, the ones who died and those who got back home, I didn't learn a thing. I just don't know. But what I have found out as I've sat here in my own home, you will hear. You have that right. I'll not conceal it from you. People say spear-fighting Myrmidons reached home safely, led by the brilliant and brave son of Achilles, as did the brave son of Paeus, too, Philoctetes. And Idomeneus got all his comrades back to Crete, the ones who'd made it through the war. Not one of them was lost at sea. As for Agamemnon, although you live a long way off, you've heard of his return, how he came home, and then how Aegisthus planned his vicious slaughter, and later paid a terrible reckoning. That's why it's good for any murdered man to leave a worthy son, for Orestes got his revenge against his father's killer, sly Aegisthus, who'd slain Agamemnon, that splendid man. And you, my friend, I see you're a powerful, fine-looking man, but you must act with courage, so those born in future years will say good things of you. Shrewd Telemachus then said in reply, Nestor, son of Neleus, great glory of Achaeans, yes, indeed, Orestes got his revenge. Achaeans will all celebrate his fame and sing of it to men in years to come. If gods would only give me strength like that, so I could pay these haughty suitors back. They bring me such distress. In all their pride, they keep plotting on evil things for me, and happiness like that the gods deny me and my father. But in spite of that, I must keep going. Geranian horsemen then said to Telemachus, My friend, you mentioned this and made me think of it. They say that many suitors in your home seeking to become your mother's husband keep devising hostile schemes against you over your objections. So tell me this, are you being oppressed with your consent? Or in response to what some god has said, have the people turned against you? Who knows whether Odysseus will return someday to pay them back for all their violence, either alone or with a combined force of Achaean warriors. How I wish Athena with her bright eyes were willing to cherish you the way she cared back then for fine Odysseus in the land of Troy, where we Achaeans had to undergo such grievous times. For I have never seen the gods display their love so openly as Pallas Athena did supporting him. If she was keen to love you in that way and to take you to her heart, those suitors would soon forget about being married. Shrewd Telemachus then answered Nestor, saying, Old man, I do not think what you've described will ever come to pass. What you have said is too much to expect. I am surprised you mention it. I entertain no hopes that it could happen to me, even if the gods themselves were willing. Then Athena, bright-eyed goddess, answered him, Telemachus, what words just passed the barrier of your teeth? A god could easily bring someone home from a long way off, if he wanted to. But I'd prefer to suffer many hardships and see the day when I got back again and reached my home than to complete my trip only to be butchered by my own hearth, the way that Agamemnon was cut down, tricked by his own wife and by Aegisthus. But the gods cannot protect a man from death, which comes to all, even to ones they love, once the destroying fate of a harsh doom has him in its grip. Prude Telemachus then said in answer to Athena, Mentor, though we're sad, let's not discuss this further. For him, there'll be no more returning home. No, for by this time the immortal gods have planned some dismal fate for him. I'd like to change the subject and question Nestor. He's a righteous and intelligent man, more so than others. He's been king, they say, for over 3 generations of mortal men. As I look at him, he seems immortal. O Nestor, son of Neleus, tell me this. How did wide-ruling Agamemnon, son of Atreus, meet his death? And where was Menelaus? As for Aegisthus, that deceitful man, what did he devise to kill a man much finer than himself? Was Menelaus not in Achaean Argos, but wandering around some foreign land? Was that what made Aegisthus brave enough to carry out the killing? Geranian horseman Nestor then answered Telemachus and said, My lad, I'll tell you all this and speak frankly, too. You yourself obviously understand what would have happened if Menelaus, Atreus' fair-haired son, had reached his home from Troy and found Aegisthus living there, in his own house. He would have killed the man. No one would have heaped up a tomb for him. He'd have been eaten by the dogs and birds as he lay on the plain outside the town. And not one of the Achaean women would have lamented him, the one who planned the monstrous act. While we were there in Troy fighting hard in battle after battle, he was enjoying himself, tucked away in horse-breeding Argos, seeking to seduce the wife of Agamemnon with his talk. Lady Clytemnestra at first turned down such a repulsive crime, for she possessed a noble heart. Besides, she had with her a singer, whom the son of Atreus had firmly charged to watch out for his wife when he'd embarked for Troy. But then, when fate sent from the gods caught her, and she succumbed, Aegisthus took that singer far away to a lonely island and abandoned him, a trophy for the birds to prey upon. And when he wished to take her to his home, she agreed to go. Then Aegisthus burned many thigh cuts on the holy altars dedicated to the gods, and offered all sorts of treasure, woven goods and gold, for he had managed a tremendous act, and found success beyond his fondest dreams. Well, once we'd left Troy, we sailed together, Menelaus and myself. At the time, our relationship was very friendly. But when we came to holy Sunion, the Athenian headland, Phoebus Apollo with his gentle arrows struck down and killed the helmsman of Menelaus' ship, Phrontis, Onotor's son, as he gripped the steering oar on the swift-moving ship. He was a man preeminent among the tribes of men in piloting a ship through stormy winds. Now, though Menelaus was still very keen to keep going on his trip, he stayed there to bury his companion and provide the funeral rites. But when he relaunched his hollow ships upon the wine-dark sea and quickly reached the steep crag of Malea, far-seeing Lord Zeus carried out a scheme to make his voyage dreadful. He sent down blasting winds and immense waves like mountains. Once he'd split Menelaus' fleet in 2, Zeus pushed some to Crete, where Cnidians live, beside banks of the river Iardanus. There's a steep cliff there, rocks facing the sea, right in the misty surf, on Gorton's borders, where southwest wind forces gigantic waves against the promontory on the left, by Phaistus. A small rock in that spot holds back the mighty waves. Some of his ships came there. After making desperate efforts, the men escaped destruction, but on that very rock the ships were smashed to pieces by the waves. The wind then drove 5 other dark-nosed ships over the waves, taking them to Egypt, where Menelaus and his ships then sailed among some folk who spoke a foreign tongue and gathered plentiful supplies and gold, while at home Aegisthus planned the murder. After he had killed the son of Atreus, Aegisthus ruled Mycenae 7 years. Under his kingship, people were oppressed, but in the 8th year, brave Orestes came back from Athens. Bad news for Aegisthus. Orestes slew his father's murderer, sly Aegisthus, because he had cut down his famous father. Once he'd killed the man, he held a funeral feast for all the Argives, in remembrance of his hateful mother and cowardly Aegisthus. That same day, Menelaus, so good at battle shouts, arrived, bringing large amounts of treasure, as much as his remaining ships could hold. So now, my friend, you must not wander off and stay away from home too long, leaving your possessions there with such shameless men in your own house, in case they take away all your wealth or eat it up. That would make your voyage here quite useless. I'd urge you, and this I strongly recommend, to go to Menelaus, for he's just come home from foreign places very recently, when no one in his heart had any hope he might be returning from those people. For stormy winds had driven him off course, at first into the sea so large that birds take a year or more to fly back from there. That's how huge and terrifying it is. But you and your companions should leave now, in your ship. If you'd like to go by land, I have chariots and horses for you. My sons will help as well and be your guides to fair-haired Menelaus, where he lives in noble Sparta. Make sure you ask him to speak to you and to be quite candid. He will not lie, for he is far too wise. Okay, here we are with our first little context break. And I have some questions for you all, which is great because my brain has not turned on enough to come up with them on my own. So let's see what you guys have asked me. Okay, this one is perfectly relevant. This comes from Nigel. Thank you, Nigel. Nigel said, for the Odyssey, which OMG, thank you. Thank you. Do we know why the host usually lets the guest get settled and eat and maybe even received gifts before identifying themselves? This happens again and again throughout the Odyssey. I feel it does add some suspense as a narrative device, but do we think Xenia actually worked that way, and why? Okay, I love this question, and I'd read it earlier, and then I literally started this book, and I was like, oh, perfect. This is exactly what this person is asking about, because it happens again. This is something that does happen over and over and over again, where anytime there is a guest, you get there, you get settled, you kind of get your guest gifts, be that food, lodgings, whatever. You get that as sort of the initial welcome. And I think that's the part that is Xenia. And now I wish I could say more about like real life Xenia, but I don't know enough. I'm going to have to only speak mythologically about this, especially because this is Homeric text. And so we are talking about this stuff that is definitely culturally real and tangible, but at the same time, because it's Homeric, it's coming from this like pre-cultural idea, right? So it's like, did real life Xenia form and then the Odyssey formed after it? Or did real life Xenia form from something like the Odyssey? Or is it both, right? And so yes, again, can't say anything about the reality, but in terms of the story, I think that's what this is really doing, is that it is this example, because the Odyssey is just like a long series of examples of both like good and bad Xenia, right? There's debate about which does and does not count as like quote unquote official Xenia, but this is an example of good Xenia, which I think is why we get like, the suitors who are very examples of very bad Xenia, right? They are not giving anything to their hosts. They are treating their hosts badly. Those are people who are committing really, really bad Xenia. Whereas as soon as Telemachus leaves that experience, he goes to Pylos, where he is treated with very, very good Xenia. He's welcomed completely and then, given all the food that he needs to eat. It's always very clear, like, they have eaten all they need to, and that's when they start to tell their story. And then that's going to happen again in Sparta in the next book, where, again, we get this really clear sign of, like, what is really good Xenia. And I think that's really meant to be a contrast both to the suitors, but then also to what is going to come from Odysseus, right? Because he is also somebody who commits, like, good and bad acts of Xenia. So I think it's really just meant to be as this, it's a narrative device and a cultural reality, right? But it is meant to really hone in and really remind you of what good Xenia looks like, so that then you can recognize bad Xenia when you see it. Yeah, I think that's basically it. It's really fun, though. It's interesting, as it also serves fundamentally as, like, storytelling device, right? Not necessarily like a memory aid, but the way so many of these kind of scenes, especially when they happen over and over and over again, the way these function is like almost like a pre-recorded scene in the poet's mind, right? The singer poet. They're like, okay, this is kind of the structure of a scene, and then you just place your characters into it. But they have that kind of living within them, so it can kind of, I imagine, be like sort of pulled out in the moment. So that's why they're sort of repetitive in that way. They're meant to be not reminders so much as just like pre-imagined scenes that can kind of set where we're at, what's going to happen, you know, with whatever characters you might need. Okay, and I'm going to answer one more really quick question that I got in the Spotify comments, because it's really connected to the beginning and I want to make sure we get it here. So Amanda wrote, a resourceful man? Any chance you can have the translator on the show to explain this choice? Okay, I know no current plans about getting this translator on, but there is a certain other translator of the Odyssey that I may have recorded an episode with last week. You know, I don't know, maybe you've heard of her? Oh! We'll see. Okay. So this question, again, resourceful man. So what obviously this is in reference to is the very first line of the Odyssey, which is, you know, depending on your translation, sing muse of a resourceful man or a complicated man, a man of many ways, a man of many turns. So honestly, for me, I wouldn't need much in the way of an explanation for this from the translator. So I can just give you what I think, because I think it's a very reasonable translation. I personally really like Emily Wilson's translation of complicated. That may or may not be something that comes up in this theoretical conversation I've recorded with a person whose name I won't say, but I already did. Anyway, that complicated, I think, is really interesting because people love to take it as like as if it's a bad term or like negative about Odysseus, which I think is really interesting because, like, why would you find complicated to be negative? Like, I'm a complicated person and I like that. Like, being complicated is like not bad. But yeah, so, you know, that's Emily Wilson's. That's my favorite, complicated, because I think it really conveys what Odysseus is, because he is like everything in a person, right? He's good, he's bad, he's a liar, he's a truth teller, he's messy, he's tidy, he's like heroic, he's also absolutely like the opposite of heroic, you know, he's that. And so to me, like, resourceful works okay. I don't think it conveys the same as complicated, but resourceful works for what the Greek word is. So the Greek word is polytropos, right? Which means many turns, many ways, many like roads, tropes, really. If you think tropos is where we get the word trope, many tropes, poly, right? Many. Polyamory? Why is that the only poly I can think of? There's lots of polys in English. But so polytropos. So a man of many turns, many ways. That means, like, it's not like that doesn't make sense in English, but it also doesn't make sense in English, right? Like, you can kind of imagine what that means, but like, it's not a phrase we would use. It's not like a comfortable way of explaining a human's behavior in English, many ways. But what it does mean, like, there's lots of different forms of that word and like similarities, and there's lots of different words where Odysseus is described in that kind of way, where it just means, like, I think a funnier, more like meme-y way of describing him is like he contains multitudes, you know? Like, there's just a lot going on, and that's why you get a word like resourceful, which I think implies a lot more of like a positive connotation than it needs to. I like complicated because it's more like it's like nothing. It's like a blank slate of a person, right? It's just like a statement. They're complicated. It's not good. It's not bad. Whereas resourceful kind of implies that like it's always going to be like something where he is, you know, pulling from these resources. He's really smart and all this. And he is smart, obviously, but resourceful is implying that like he is always going to use those resources in like a good or productive way, I think. Whereas like complicated is like, well, sometimes he's going to be resourceful and sometimes he's going to be an absolute dumbass, right? And so yeah, there's so many different ways of translating that. I don't think resourceful is like my favorite, but I also don't think it's bad, you know? So anyway, thank you for both of those questions. We're diving right back in. As Nestor finished talking, the sun was setting and dark night was coming on. At that point, Athena, the bright-eyed goddess, said to them, "Old man, what you've just said is true and relevant, but now you should slice out the victims' tongues and mix the wine so we can make libations to Lord Poseidon and to other gods, and then think of rest. It's that time of day. Now the light has slid below the darkness, and it's not right for us to linger here, at feasting for the gods. We must get back." Zeus's daughter spoke, and they heard what she had said. Heralds poured out water for them to wash their hands, and young boys filled up wine bowls to the brim with drink, and served them all, pouring wine out into cups, the first drops for libations. They threw the bowls' tongues on the fire, and, standing up, made their offerings. That tribute done, they drank wine to their heart's content. Then both Athena and godlike Telemachus wished to get back to their hollow ship. But Nestor, wanting them to stay there, appealed to them and said, "Zeus and other eternal gods forbid that you should leave my home for your fast ship, as if you were departing from a man who has no clothes or riches, some pauper whose home lacks a store of cloaks or blankets to give him and his guests a gentle sleep. My house has coverlets and lovely rugs. Surely the dear brave son of Odysseus will not lie down to sleep on a ship's deck? Not while I'm alive and still have children left in my own halls to welcome strangers, whoever visits me in my home." Athena, bright-eyed goddess, then answered Nestor, "No doubt what you have said, old friend, is wise, and Telemachus should follow your advice. It would be better if he did. But now, when he goes back with you to get some sleep in your own home, I will go back to our black ship to rally the morale of our companions and tell them everything. Among our group, I'm the only one who can make the claim that I'm an older man. The rest are young, all the same age as brave Telemachus. They follow us because they are our friends. I'll lie down on the hollow ship tonight and in the morning go to the Cocones, for they owe me a still outstanding debt, not a small amount. Since Telemachus has visited your home, give him horses, the strongest and the fastest ones you have. Send him off in a chariot with your son." Glittery-eyed Athena said these words and left, taking on the form of a sea eagle. Amazement overwhelmed Achaeans watching, and old Nestor was filled with wonder as his eyes took in the sight. He grabbed Telemachus's hand and said to him, "My friend, I don't think you'll turn out to be a bad or feeble man if gods follow you to be your guide when you're so very young. Of all those who live on Mount Olympus, that is none other than Zeus's daughter, the glorious Tritogenia, the god who held your splendid father in such honor among the Argives. But now, dear goddess, be gracious and give me a noble fame, me, my children, and the wife I cherish. And in return, I'll sacrifice to you a broad-faced heifer as yet unbroken. No man has put that beast beneath the yoke. I'll offer her to you with gold-wrapped horns." Nestor spoke this prayer, and Pallas Athena heard him. Then Gerenian horseman Nestor led them away, with his sons and sons-in-law, to his lovely home. Once they had reached the splendid palace of the king, they sat down in rows on high-backed chairs and couches. When all of them came in, the old man mixed for them a bowl of sweet wine 10 years old, which his steward opened after loosening the lid. The old man had some of it mixed in a bowl and then poured out libations as he prayed in earnest to Athena, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus. Others did the same. Then they drank the wine to their heart's content and left, each to his own home, to get some sleep. Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, told Telemachus, godlike Odysseus' dear son, to sleep right there on a corded bed in the echoing corridor, with spear fighter Pisistratus, leader of men, there beside him in the palace. Of all his sons, he was the only one who was not yet married. Nestor himself slept in an inner chamber inside the high-roofed house with his noble wife, who had prepared the bed lying down beside him. As soon as rose-fingered early dawn appeared, Gerenian horseman Nestor got out of his bed, went outside, and sat down before his high white doors on polished stones, which glistened as if rubbed with oil. Neleus, in earlier times, used to sit on them, a man whose wise advice was equal to the gods. But fate had overtaken him now. He'd gone to Hades, so now Gerenian horseman Nestor, the protector of Achaeans, sat on those stones, a scepter in hand. His sons came from their rooms and gathered round him in a throng: Echephron, Stratius, Perseus, Aretus, and Thrasymedes. Then the sixth son joined them, warrior Pisistratus. They brought in godlike Telemachus, asking him to sit among them. Gerenian horseman Nestor then began to speak to them. My dear children, you must act on my desires, and quickly, so I can propitiate Athena before the other gods. She came to me in manifest form at Poseidon's feast. So come, one of you must fetch a heifer out there in the plain, and to guarantee the beasts get here as quickly as it can, have the cattle herder drive it back to me. Then someone must set off for the black ship of brave Telemachus and bring back here all of his companions, leaving only 2. And tell the goldsmith Laerces to come so he can wrap the heifer's horns with gold. All the rest of you stay here together. You must tell the inside household servants to prepare a fine banquet in the house, with chairs and logs set all around. Make sure they bring fresh water. Once Nestor finished speaking, the men all set to work. The heifer from the plain was driven in, and brave Telemachus' comrades arrived from their ship. The goldsmith came as well, carrying the bronze tools as he needed for his trade, an anvil, hammer, and well-crafted tongs, the things he used to work with the gold. Athena also came, ready to receive the sacrifice. Then Nestor, the old chariot fighter, produced the gold. The smith crafted it into a rich design and wrapped it around the heifer's horns, so that the goddess, when she saw the offering, would rejoice. Stratius and Echephron led in the heifer by the horns, as Aretus entered from a room inside the house, bringing water in a basin etched with flowers for them to wash their hands. In his other hand he carried a basket filled with barley grains. Steadfast Thrasymedes stood holding a sharp axe to cut down the heifer, and Perseus held a bowl to catch the victim's blood. Then old man Nestor, the chariot fighter, began the ritual washing, and sprinkled barley grains, intoning many prayers offered to Athena. As the initial gift from the heifer's head, he cut off a single hair and threw it on the fire. Once they made their prayers and scattered grains of barley, then Thrasymedes, Nestor's courageous son, approached the animal and struck it. The axe sliced through the sinews on its neck, and the spirit of the beast ebbed out. The women, Nestor's daughters, his son's wives, and his cherished wife, Eurydice, eldest daughter of Clymenus, raised the sacred cry as the men lifted up the animal's head above the much-traveled earth. Pisistratus, leader of men, slit the beast's throat, and its black blood flowed out. The spirit left its bones. They carved the body quickly, cutting thigh bones out, all in proper order, and then covered them up in double folds of fat and set raw meat on top. Next, the old man burned those offerings on split wood, and over them poured out gleaming wine. Beside Nestor stood young men with 5-pronged forks in hand. Once the thighs had been completely burned and they had sampled innards, they sliced up the remaining meat, placed it on spits, and held the pointed skewers out above the fire. Then beautiful Polycaste, youngest daughter of old Nestor, son of Neleus, bathed Telemachus. When the bath was finished, she rubbed him with rich oil and offered him a tunic and fine cloak to wear. As he came from his bath, he looked just like a god. He went and sat by Nestor, the people's shepherd. After they had roasted the upper cuts of meat and pulled the pieces off the spits, they sat and ate. The servers were distinguished men who poured the wine in goblets made of gold. Once they had all eaten their fill of food and drink, Geranian horseman Nestor was the first to speak. He said, "Come now, my sons, hitch up some fine-maned horses to a chariot so Telemachus can start his journey." Nestor spoke. They heard and carried out his orders, eagerly and quickly harnessing swift horses on the chariot. In it a servant woman stored bread and wine and special delicacies too, various assortments that those kings Zeus cherishes eat with such delight. Then Telemachus climbed up inside the splendid chariot, and Nestor's son Pisistratus, leader of men, stepped up as well, beside him in the chariot, grabbing the reins and cracking the whip. The chariot team of horses raced willingly across the plain, leaving behind the steep citadel of Pylos, and all day long they rattled the yoke and harness across their necks. Then the sun set, and darkness covered all the roads. The two men reached the home of Diocles in Pherae. He was the son of Ortilochus, whose father was Alpheus. They spent the night in Pherae. Diocles offered them the hospitality he owed to strangers who visited him as guests. Then, as soon as rose-fingered dawn early appeared, they hitched their horses, climbed in the splendid chariot, and set off from the echoing portico and gate. With a touch of the whip, the horses raced along, eager to run. The two men reached plains full of wheat in a hurry to complete their trip. So quickly did that pair of speeding horses pull them onward. And the sun went down, and all the roads grew dark. Okay, nerds, I'm going to be totally upfront with you all. That book lasted longer than I expected, and my voice is already going. I was going to read 2 books in this episode, but I've been reading aloud for like 10 hours over the past couple of days, and so I'm not actually going to keep going just to arrest my voice. So we're just getting the 1 book today. Apologies, but I know you understand. So instead, I'm just going to finish off with 2 more questions that came in through Spotify. So this one was from Ida, who said, here's some questions. 1, what do you think of the ancient Greek concept of fate, like in the start of book 1, when the gods are talking about Aegisthus? Okay, I'm glad you asked that because I think it's really interesting. So I absolutely love the kind of traditional idea that we have around the Greek understanding of fate, right? The very, very like the mythos of it is that there are the 3 women who spin, one of them spins someone's life thread, another one measures the length of it, and then the third cuts. Their names are Clotho, Atropos, and Lachesis. That said, and of course, just to put a really fine point on it, in Disney's Hercules, they do meld the characters of the Moirai, the Fates, with the characters of the Graei, the gray ones who are in Perseus' story, and those are 3 women who share 1 eye and 1 tooth between them, naturally. Anyway, I think that's one of the greatest things done in pop culture. But the Fates, the thread process, is the mythos from Hercules. Again, just without the weird eye and tooth situation. But I don't actually really ever find that their concept, like, as like personifications comes up very often. Like, the idea of fate generally being decided by the gods, I think, was very important. But in the same way that I think that that's like how Christians see things, right? Like God's plan, whatever. So I really think that ultimately their idea was fate was more like that, where it's just like the gods have planned this for you. And then if you were to ask someone like really nitty gritty of like how they might be able to get into the fates, the Moirai specifically, the women, I think generally it's more just the concept of fate, as much as I would like it to be really specifically that like people understood it to be these women weaving the thread and everything. I think it's a little bit more general of just fate, but it doesn't make it any less interesting. But I do think it's a little bit less like intense than we might imagine. And this person, Ida's second question, which was also great, is what does winged words mean? In Emily Wilson's translation too, both gods and mortals often speak with words on wings, or some variation of those words. Is it just an ancient Greek, or does it have a special meaning? I think winged words is like, it's definitely like a phrase in ancient Greek. You know, it's like so many of those phrases that they repeatedly use, like rosy-fingered dawn, horse lord, or horse tamer, or Guranian horse lord. Guranian means like old and wise. And I think it's one of those. It's these like common phrases that get reused. And I think, again, this is like a poetic style and also like a poetic like framing device, narrative device as well, right? To like kind of keep yourself in the narrative, keep yourself in the storytelling by like repeating these kind of epithets over and over. That said, winged words, I think, is specifically one that is just meant to imply like, I mean, I think in the case when it's used with gods, it is kind of meant to imply like a word of God type situation, right? It's like words that are bigger than just one person speaking to another. That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, not necessarily literally, but just that's a way of describing people who are particularly good with their words, or, you know, particularly clever, and things like that. So I think, yeah, it's sort of, it means a lot of things, but also I think it's just like a really pretty phrase, particularly in English. So like, I think that's one of the few translations that like really sounds like quite nice in English, in a phrase that would generally, I'm assuming, I haven't had a chance to look it up in this moment, but I'm assuming it's a pretty literal translation, because that sounds like exactly like a phrase that ancient Greek would use, but it also works really well in English. And so I think that's also probably why you see a lot of translators using that, what I assume, again, is a literal translation, because it both is the phrasing conveyed in the ancient Greek, it conveys this kind of words that are bigger than just a simple conversation between two people, and also simultaneously like comes across really beautifully and poetically in English. And so that's why you're seeing like the exact same phrase used often. So I would imagine that's it. I really love the winged words, so I'm glad you asked about it. And thank you all. That's all to say. That's it for today's reading episode, but I will be back with more soon. I will say, however I have to make it happen, we will get to the end of this reading before the movie comes out. So there might be a little bit of period, probably when I'm promoting my own book, where we're doing heavier amounts of the Odyssey, also to help me, because I'm going to be away promoting my Odyssey. But we are going to get this. We're going to get it out before this movie, okay? Before Matt Damon, the most white American man to ever live, is graced as graced our screens as Odysseus. Oh, can you hear it in my voice? Anyway, before that, we will get to the end of the Odyssey in this reading, and we're gonna be doing as much Odyssey as humanly possible, quite frankly, because I will never get enough. I trust that you all will never get enough, and also, you know, it's a really great excuse this year to just be deep in the Odyssey, particularly as an excuse from the horrors, not an excuse, an escape from the horrors. I'm not gonna do a rant this time, but I also am really, 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 really appreciative of everyone who commented on my rant last time, because I sometimes need to hear it, because I feel like I'm screaming into a void, but I also don't know how to be one of those people who just pretends it isn't happening. So here we are. Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Pangowish is the Hermes to my Olympians, my incredible producer. She will be back with more Hellenistic goodies very soon. And select music by Luke Chaos. The podcast is part of the Memory Collective Podcast Network, which, guess what? More Odyssey coming there too, and other cool nerdy things. Stay tuned for more. If you haven't already, please check out the group trip options that is listed on my website, mythsbaby.com/group trip. I will be sharing more and more about that soon. But get in as quickly as possible, please, if you want to join us on our little trip to live amongst the Minoans on Crete, and then Dionysus and Ariadne on Naxos with the best potatoes and cheese you'll ever have in your life, and then Athens, the city of Theseus. Join me there, please. mythsbaby.com/group trip. I am Liv, and I love you all so much, but I love this shit, even whiny little Telemachus, most of all.